Hey everyone, welcome to today's Rotary Snack Program. Today we welcome Ron Smith, the editor of Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service. Next week, fellow Rotarian Alex Chu will talk about residential real estate. The Snack Program Committee is presenting a series on Milwaukee news resources, the changes and challenges they've encountered and the value they provide. We're kicking things off with the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service and editor Ron Smith, who will discuss the history of his organization, its special niche in the journalism industry, and why local journalism and supporting it matters. Ron, who we coordinated our shirts today, he serves on Marquette University Diederich College of Communications Department of Journalism and Media Studies. He's been editor, program director of the award-winning Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service since February 2019. This nonprofit service, staffed by professionals, student journalists, and community residents, covers Milwaukee's communities of color. A native of Chicago, Ron was managing editor for news at USA Today, was the deputy managing editor for daily news and production at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and has worked in newsrooms across the country, including the Oregonian, the Los Angeles Times, and Newsday. Ron has been active in the National Association of Black Journalists, the American Copy Editors Society, and the Online News Association. He holds a master's degree in leadership studies with a specialization in public service from Marquette University, where he also earned a bachelor's degree in communication studies. Please submit your questions via the chat button, or we'll unmute ourselves and ask questions directly after Ron's presentation. Thank you for joining us today, Ron.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here, and let me say that I apologize because I'm in the basement of my house because we're having Wi-Fi wars in the house, and this is where it works. So you all have wonderful backgrounds. I do not, but we will make it work, right? So that's what 2021 is all about. So thank you for having me. I'm delighted to talk about the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service and to give you some context. I don't want this to be an infomercial, but you can find us at milwaukeennS.org. And so in short, NNS traces its origin to 10 years ago. We've been around for 10 years, and we're so delighted to still be here. A lot of newsrooms have closed. A lot of newsrooms have stopped, particularly with nonprofit newsrooms. So we are here. And if you just forward to the next two slides, I just always like to start my conversations this way. So, and there's another one, and then we can be done with that. So I start with this because it speaks to who we are and what we do at Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service. So the four key words are: we're about Milwaukee, we're about neighborhoods, particularly low-income neighborhoods in Milwaukee on the north side and south side. We're about news, providing fact-based journalism, and we're about service. So that project was something that we did. We went around during the holidays. The staff, actually, everyone on the staff has had some kind of issue with COVID, from family members, taking care of family members to themselves. And we wanted to do something special for our neighbors. So what we did was we signed up to have them take socially distanced holiday portraits. So we went to 50 homes over a weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The staff, they volunteered. I didn't do it because actually at that time I had COVID. And so we went around and it was just, again, a service to let our readers know that, hey, we love you and care for you. It wasn't about trying to advertise or get something from them. So that's just an example of what we do at Neighborhood News Service. I want to give you kind of an idea about the media landscape that we face now. Since 2006, more than 2,000 newsrooms have closed. 2,000. In the last 10 years, most newsrooms the staff of newsrooms have been halved. So there's, half the staff that is there. So for example, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, where I worked for 14 years, When I came there in 2003, there were 350 people in the newsroom. And now I would imagine there's 85. And so what that means is that if we say, and I do believe that information is power, right? What we know, who we know, comes through our social network and also from what we read and what we don't read. And if information is power, then power belongs to the people. And that's where NNS comes in. And that's why we are blessed to have an NNS in our city. A lot of times we found when NNS was created 10 years ago, it was formed through the Zilber Foundation, among many other foundations. And what that meant was Joseph Zilber, everyone remembers, a local philanthropist who did many, many great things throughout the city, wanted to kind of find out like his legacy, like what could we do to better lives in the central city? As they kind of did their research, they felt that there was an information gap that was happening in the neighborhoods that NNS covers. That these people who lived in those neighborhoods were not reading the news or the news was not getting to them. It was a news desert. So out of that, they formed NNS. And like I said, it's been around for 10 years. Now we're housed in a College of Communication at Marquette, but we're editorially independent. So no one from Marquette determines what we do, what we cover. But we are able to take advantage of Marquette's tremendous, the legal team, the fundraising team, the equipment, the students, and things like that. Our budget is pretty tiny. It's about $150,000. And that goes to support the 6 part-time editors and reporters that work for NNS. And I say 6. We've written over 7,000 stories over the last 10 years, and all from a part-time staff. And so we have a part-time staff of 6 or 7 that are paid. They work 15 to 20 hours a week. And then we also use student interns from Marquette and across the city, MATC, UWM, Alverno, whoever has an interest in our neighborhoods. And then we have a committed group of volunteers that help us cover the stories. So why do we need an NNS? Well, we need an NNS, and I think that every city needs an NNS to kind of fill information needs. In our communities, a lot of times there was no press. Some people will call our readers marginalized. I don't like that word because it puts the onus on them. It is not their fault that they're low income or don't have the resources or access to information that others do. What they are is misrepresented. And what do I mean when I say misrepresented? A lot of times people come into our neighborhoods when there's gloom and doom, when there's a shooting, when there's a drug deal, when there's conflict. And NNS exists to counter that narrative. We believe in representing people in all facets of their lives. That doesn't mean that we are the quote good news agency. We are not. But what we do is 3 things that we have 3 buckets of what I call of our philosophy in terms of coverage. One is that we intentionally celebrate the ordinary people who do extraordinary things. So yes, we might talk about shootings and reckless driving and some of the problems and challenges that people face, but we never forget that those people are also there people who are resilient and are doing many beautiful things. So we call that the celebration. The second part of our strategy is called education. And what I mean by that is that we take time to connect our readers to resources. So it could be, where do you get food? Where do you get vaccinated? Where do you get your GED? Where do you get information on housing? So we try to, there's a lot of nonprofits in our neighborhoods and throughout the city, and even the city and county that do great things, they don't reach our audience. So we make an effort to have these, what I call this bucket of resources that we can let people know how they can get help. The third part of our strategy is called illumination, which is kind of doing just good watchdog journalism. And so we focus our journalism, since I've been here for 2 years, we've really kind of hone down to what we're doing so that we can stop doing things that we shouldn't be doing that other people do well. So we focus on housing and eviction, public safety, health has been, of course, a big topic. Health, mental health, chronic diseases, access to healthcare, and of course, the pandemic and COVID. We do nonprofits, focusing on the nonprofits that serve our area. And we also do arts and culture, letting people know here are ways that we can help you live your lives. So we really kind of hone in on those issues because we feel that in this, we have become credible messengers for people. And our staff is very diverse. They come from Milwaukee, or they've lived in Milwaukee for 14 to 15 years at the minimum. And so we focus on issues that we think are important to the community. As a byproduct of that, we offer residents a chance to communicate issues that are important to them. So for example, through our community voices, which are op-eds, you'll find stuff that you will never, ever probably see anywhere else. We write stuff about, why being a Native American is important to me. We write stuff about, they write stuff, our readers, all the time about health disparities, what that means to me. My grandmother has COVID, how I've gotten through it. And we allow that section to exist so people can talk to each other. Last, we work with other newsrooms. We're perhaps one of the most collaborative newsrooms in the city because we actually, on our website and on our Facebook page, we share if there's news that affects our neighborhoods. We don't mind sharing the wealth. So we will often share things from the Journal Sentinel, TMJ4, Spectrum News, things that if it matters to our readers, we don't care who wrote it. We are very platform agnostic. We want to give people the information that they need. So as I said, we're a nonprofit. What's that mean? That means that we are not making any money. That's not the goal of NNS. It's been to give information to people and to provide it free of charge. So how we raise our money, the money that we have is from our own fundraising campaigns and through donations. We collaborate with other newsrooms, for example, the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism. They're based in Madison, and we are working together on a project called News 414. And that was a project that began last year. It was one of 35 projects to win funding from the Google Innovation Grant. And what that did was we were able to send text-based messaging to our communities about issues such as housing, food insecurity, things like that, and in real time. So here's the information you need. And then we could take a poll of what they needed and design and write stories based on that. So during COVID, we started really early. We were supposed to start, I think, in June. We ended up starting in March as we, the pandemic happened, and actually spent a lot of time with residents they wanted to know, things about COVID. But the interesting takeaway from that lesson was that what we learned was that if you were struggling before COVID, it got worse. So while COVID was an underlying concern of our readers, they were concerned about housing and eviction and food insecurity. Those three areas were the three top buckets that we still have. And so what we've done this year, we don't have the Google, is that NNS is spending we redesigned our beats to kind of accommodate News 414. So we're sending text-based messages and resources to our communities. We're focused right now on 53206 on the north side and 53215 on the south side. And one of the things that we're doing is we're offering Spanish translation. So that was a big thing when we're talking to community groups on the south side last year. They're like, this is great, but how can we get it so that our audience knows what to read and when to read? So we have been lucky to work together to get this done. And we have been kind of blessed to see that other people are kind of following our lead. We're often asked about, how do you do these things? And how do you do so much with so little? And I will tell you that it's every nonprofit, and I'm sure you guys know that, in every business becomes a labor of love. and we have a mission. And I think that people have gotten that mission about what we do and who we are. And it's important, particularly as the local media landscape changes, right? In Milwaukee, we still have great journalism. We do. And I've been all over the world, all over the country, working at different places. We still have great journalism. What has happened now because of cutbacks is that we actually probably talk more to each other, the newsrooms, than we ever did before, because we don't have time to do the same story. You're never going to see TMJ and Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and NNS probably all in the same place unless it's a really big story. But what will happen is that TMJ, which is one of our partners, will say, hey, Ron, are you guys doing something about this eviction moratorium? Like, yes, we are. Okay, then we're going to wait. We're going to do something else. There's more discussion, even with the Journal Sentinel, about, resources. Can we share? Can we help train each other? Because, the day of, we're doing this for democracy, right? The days of, I always tell people that we like to complete and not compete. So we work particularly with Spectrum News. We work with TMJ4, Milwaukee PBS, the local gospel stations, the Black Weekly, Milwaukee Courier, and the Milwaukee Community Journal, where they can republish our stuff, Urban Milwaukee, All Milwaukee. So everyone has their niche that they're carving, and we're learning to kind of stay in our lane and support each other and not rip each other to shreds. So of course it's competitive for the for-profit folks, but for people like NNS, we exist in a space where we're kind of everyone's favorite because we're not taking their ads and we're not taking anything away. We're adding, and that's forced our staff to also think of things differently too. So for example, if the Journal Sentinel has a story that we've been working on and they did it better and faster, say they did something on the American Black Holocaust Museum, and they got the information faster, my response will be, what can we do that's different? And if not, just share the Journal Sentinel story. So it's been an interesting journey, working with younger reporters, working with older reporters too. Our newsroom is very diverse in terms of race, in terms of age. And we were lucky for the first time last year to get 2 full-time people. So by the way, like I said, my salary is paid through Marquette. So my salary does not come from the fundraising, but everyone else does. And so we got 2 Report for America core people this year, and that was an important get for NNS because that's a national-based program that places emerging journalists into newsrooms across the country. And we got 2, which speaks to the quality of work that we're doing. And they were luckily, one is Princess, who is from Milwaukee, a Marquette graduate. The other is Matt Martinez, who also graduated from Marquette, who's Latino. Princess is African-American. And that's helped round up our staff to be able to do other type of things. So it's an exciting time, particularly when we come to talking about COVID and racial equity and so many of the challenges that we're facing. So I invite you guys to not only support NNS, but support all your local media, because knowledge is power. And if you don't know, if you don't have the information, you don't have the power. And I think I'll stop there and see what questions you might have.
Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
This is great, Ron. Thank you so much for all that you do. I really am impressed. I'm curious, as you talk about the other media outlets, do you have a feel at all for how much overlap there is in the readership?
Oh, it's interesting. So I'll give you the Journal Sentinel. So I don't think there's a lot of overlap. I think that what will happen is we'll take a story from the Journal Sentinel and share it on our Facebook page. It could be, I don't know, something about a young teenage artist. The Journal Sentinel is still doing great work. And what we'll see is, I'll tell George Stanley, the editor, look at this engagement that we're getting on NNS that is not happening on your page, right? And also the trolling that happens. So we have a very measured group of people who read NNS that are not there for drama. So I watched this one person who always trolls JS Online do the same thing on NNS. Like, why is it only Black and brown people? And then the NNS person whose response says, well, because this affects that community. And then this other person says fake news, and no one responds, which I love. They're done. And so he has to go back to JS Online and troll, right? Because it's not happening at NNS. So I do think that I think there's been more of an awareness that they need to cover some of these diverse communities that they have not connected to, but it has not, in terms of what we do, I have not seen a lot of overlap. There's some things that, I always will take their lead. Like, for example, they've been doing a great job with, Fire and Police Commission. We don't have a full-time reporter to cover that. So we'll take our angle a different way. But there's so much news that's going on that, no one could actually ever do it all. When I started at the Journal Sentinel, there was probably 7 or 8 people covering the county. And I think now there's just one person. So there's just not enough. There's just, it's a challenge just to get through the day, let alone to do the deep dog reporting. And so I think everyone's kind of learned to stay in their lane and to do what's important to them. And I forgot to mention, of course, there's the Milwaukee Business Journal does a great job. I mean, there's a lot of rich journalism that's going on in Milwaukee that's not happening in a lot of other places. And so we are blessed, and we need to support them all.
Ron, I have a question on the media. I watch the news on television, and it just seems like it's repeated and repeated and repeated, commercial. So the status of print journalism, I think, is very important because you can do more in depth. Do you feel that the news on the broadcast media is just overdone or too light?
Yeah, I do, and but I've always felt that way. But I think there's some rise. I look at Spectrum, the Spectrum News app. I have to tell you, is wonderful. They have all type of news from local, national, international. And I say that because we've partnered with them. And in the beginning, I was kind of like, let me check out this app. And when I saw the app, I was very impressed with Spectrum. TMJ is doing a lot of innovative things. And they're hosting this thing tonight at 8 p.m. on implicit bias, something that wouldn't have been done before. So I do think that there's always rays of hope. But I agree, newspapers have always kind of set that news agenda, right? No one's going to the Milwaukee County Supervisors meeting in a broadcast area. That's not a sexy type of story. And so when you don't have that kind of shoe leather reporting, that leads to all kind of destruction and mayhem. I'm sure there are many politicians around the world, even in our areas, who are glad that there's a decline in journalism, right? Because they can do things and no one will know about it. And that's why we have to support all our local media. I didn't say the Shepherd Express. I forgot about the Shepherd Express. They are wonderful too. Everyone's doing great things, and we have to support them, because if we don't, we're going to be in trouble. And we're lucky to have what we have right now.
Ron, can you give a sense of how your readers view what you're doing in this age of kind of undermining credibility of news sources, where people like that troll will yell fake news when there's something he doesn't want to see, or when some are questioning election results and so forth. Can you talk about the steps you've taken and the response you get from your readers about Milwaukee Neighborhood News as a source of truth and a credible platform? Obviously, you have 10 years history behind you, and that helps. But in the online Wild West world, where there are truly fake news sites that are being created, and some are being created by partisan groups and others, can you talk about the environment that you're wading through, and how you maintain the credibility and maintain that trust with your readers?
Well, that's a great question, right? We don't have all the answers, but we're ever present. So I always tell people, there's a gospel singer, Shirley Caesar, and she's probably 85 years old. And she likes to say that she's on the A team and the B team. She says A team, she's going to still be a recording star, but she's going to be there when the A team leaves, right? So NNS is the same way. We don't parachute in. We've been there, right? So they know who we are. They see us. They see us at their graduations. They see us at the funerals. They see us in the community. So we actually have a relationship with them. We call them. They call us. Is NNS a household word on North Side and South Side? I don't think so. I think we can do a lot more work, but we're doing the best we can. We have not encountered that. When people when people say fake news, we've never been called that. You know, we piss off everybody sometimes. So Princess is an example of having diversity in your newsroom. Princess, during the Black Lives Matters movements over the summertime, she said at a meeting, she says, you know, where are the women? And they go, what do you mean? She says, I don't see a lot of Black women at these protests. And I said, that's a great story, find out. So Princess actually did a story about African-American women feeling left out of this movement. And what she did, and her lead was, she found an activist, an African-American activist from Milwaukee, who went to the protests in Minnesota for George Floyd. She was all enthused, and she came back to Milwaukee ready to make a difference, and felt like some of the people who were doing the BLM movements were homophobic, were sexist, and there was not a safe space for women. So she talked to 7, 8 women, and then we ran the story, and one of the leaders of that movement said, hey, this is very Journal Sentinel-like. You know, why are you guys picking on us? I thought you guys were our friends. And I said, we are the friends of the truth. If, you can disagree with what these women are saying, but they're speaking their truth. And if you want to write a community voice or, respond to it, you can. We did give you a chance to respond, although we never named him, we didn't call him out or anything, but we offered him a chance to respond. So to me, it's always about being transparent about who you are. We're smaller, so we actually can form those relationships with readers that maybe a USA Today, or Washington Post, or even a Journal Sentinel, which is a regional newsroom, just they can't do. But we take those efforts. But here's the other thing, we're not transactional. We don't come in and say, hey, we want you for a story, and then we don't stop talking to you. My team in June, again, half the team is sick, dealing with COVID like everyone else. We realized in our community, graduation is such an important issue. It is a way to celebrate. In many ways, it might be that person's last graduation. So how can we make their lives better? We went around town another weekend, took 40, 50 pictures of people posing with their degree, with their, and gave it to them. And we ran a photo gallery. But just doing those type of things, I think, our readers get that we are there for them and that we advocate for them. And is there one solution that's going to change the world? I don't know. Marty Barron, who just left the Washington Post, said something I thought was really profound a couple of weeks ago. He says, in this era of disinformation and misinformation, it's scary when we can't even agree that there was a riot at the Capitol. Right. Like, we can't agree on the same set of facts. I do think that's why it's really important for that evidence-based journalism. I teach my journalism students at Marquette that it's not about personality. It's about show me the facts, right? Leave your opinion out, show me the facts. And I think that sometimes with cable news and quite frankly, and some newspapers too, have gone too far with opinion and not being transparent with how they get their news and what that news means. And so in addition to that, you have your own social media streams where you can find anything you want that reinforces what you believe. So all this colludes together along with diminishing newsrooms to create this where we are right now. I think it'll get better before it gets worse. I think we've seen the importance of local news, but sometimes it takes, some communities are learning a rough lesson when they lose their newspaper, their local newspaper. And I pray to God that never happens here.
It's so great to hear.
Go ahead.
Just quick comment. It's just so great to hear that the old style way of doing community news, and I used to be a reporter 35 years ago at a little community newspaper. It's the same thing, building those trust relationships all over town with diverse groups all over. And that's how you maintain the credibility and the trust. And in this crazy era we're in, it still works. So, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a couple of things here. One is that, Ron, do you know that our friend Sue Valit is one of the photographers? I know that she was involved in those graduation pictures and the Christmas pictures, and she's the wife of a past president, Dan Valit. But she's a good friend of Rotary, and we appreciate all that she does with you. Also, Rotary's community work is largely centered in the Johnson's Park neighborhood, which is in the 05 zip code, but pretty close to where you are.
Mhm.
And in the past, I know that we've done stories on the work that was going on in Johnson's Park and with Feeding America. And I guess we could always continue that you would still talk about what's going on in Johnson's Park and Fond du
Absolutely.
Lac. And yeah, it's a lot of good stuff. And we continue to work there and are always looking for good ways to tell the stories of the good things going on in that neighborhood as well.
Ron, you mentioned graduations, and I can think of like birth notices and engagements and weddings as other examples. And my kids laugh when they see old newspapers and they see that everybody's address was printed next to their name in the old days. So my question is, are there areas of local news that you feel or what are the areas of local news that you feel are being underreported right now?
That's a great question. Well, I think, first of all, let's just talk about all the municipalities that we have, all the commissions, we can't, there's, the Board of Supervisors is huge in Milwaukee County. And, you could probably have 5 or 6 people covering that beat, and we don't. So I think, political news, there's not enough journalists to cover every meeting that goes on in our town, right? Let's talk about education. It's hard to cover NPS by itself, right, as an entity. There's so many other school districts, and no one can cover it all. So we're missing a lot of that. Let's talk about obituaries, for example. Journal Central had 2 or 3 obituary writers to tell people's stories. That's gone, so those stories are missing. Arts, there's just so many. I always like to focus on what we have, but there are many things that we could do better if we had more people. Reporting takes time. And people often underestimate, because they don't know the system, how much work it takes to stick on a particular story, to cover a story. At NNS, with a part-time staff, and particularly with greener reporters, it is not unusual that someone will probably have to write a story 4 or 5 times before it gets published. So we don't try to be a breaking news site. What we try to do is be issue-oriented site that you can come to for, like, hey, the health department just fired Lillian Payne, and she was helpful with racial equity. What does that mean? So Journal Central has that story. So now we're trying to get Lillian to tell that story to us, what that means, the community groups. So we'll take an issue and frame it that way. But there are many, many good things still going on in local journalism. But I do think that watchdog accountability, it becomes diluted when you don't have enough people to do that. And I think that concerns me as a democracy, because we got people who are getting emboldened and entitled because they know no one is watching. And that was the role of that local, I think newspapers did it best, because, again, if you're at a TV station, that commission meeting is not going to be sexy unless there's something huge. So local community journalists went to those meetings, and maybe they were there from 5 in the evening to 2 in the morning, but they got news. And that's missing. And we will never know what we're missing. That's the problem. We'll never know.
Gary.
It's very scary. Support everybody.
Well, we're at the end of our time here for the official program, but Ron, I don't know if you want to stay on, if anyone else has any more questions for you.
I just
I
have
have a question.
good. Go ahead, Mike.
Long time reader, first time caller, Ron. Thank you for the presentation. I love your work. With the news that the Baltimore Sun is being purchased and turned into a nonprofit, or is being a part of a nonprofit entity, do you think the future of local print / online journalism is for-profit or nonprofit? And is this a good trend or much to do about nothing?
That's a great question. And I was so happy because I worked at Newsday and LA Times, which was owned by the Tribune, like the Baltimore Sun. And so I have friends there. And so I think we were happy because we didn't want them going to, one of those vulture capitalists. But your question, though, is for-profit. I worry because every year, like, I'm begging for money to keep NNS in existence. our budget's only $150,000. I feel that every 2 years, right? I'm like, am I going to be in business? How to keep it going? And I'm doing everything I can to keep it moving. But here's what Ron has also grown up. Foundations don't exist to keep an NNS in business for 10 years. So what is our plan to sustainability? And so now everyone's talking about it. I have some, big questions about how this sustains itself. Will communities rally around and support their local media? Some people say yes. In Milwaukee, we've seen that Milwaukee's been generous just by the fact that NNS has been around for 10 years. That's because of you guys. That's because of Bader. That's because of Zilber. That's because of, we just had our Newsmatch annual fundraising campaign. We got 200 donors. 200. That was more than some other newsrooms that were bigger than us across the country. So there's definitely an appreciation for what we do in our communities. How does this last? That's the question. How can it last? Is journalism a public trust service? I think it is, but will it be funded when we have been raised and weaned not to pay for anything? Someone, I was just laughing before the meeting, put a comment that we had shared something on the BIS Journal, from the BIS Journal. I can't read it because they have, I've overdone my subscription. I'm like, well, then you need to buy it. That's all I can tell you. I don't want to buy it. I'm like, well, okay. So will people pay for it? I don't know. We're hoping. I know there's a lot of big brains out there raising money and thinking about it, but I worry every year, particularly. So Newsmatch is a campaign that we do that's funded by the Knight Foundation and the Miami Foundation and a few other foundations, and they match your income. And every year, so when we started, well, even 2 years ago, it was maybe 200 newsrooms that did it. This year was 350. So we lost our slice. We lost our slice of money, which would probably made a $56,000 difference for us, which is a third of our budget. So I do, for NNS, I have, quite honestly, here's the other thing. A lot of nonprofit newsrooms are sprouting up, but they're run by journalists who don't have business sense. They're not Rotarians, right? And so everybody wants to do that, but is that going to work if you have no business sense? To me, Marquette, we've discussed, so NNS, we're starting an endowment campaign. We think the best way for NNS to survive is to get it endowed. And so that's where we are. We're unique in that sense that we have education anchor like Marquette, but that's where we're going. Because quite frankly, our audience are not, quote, advertising friendly for some advertisers. We give our work for free. We could have like a sponsored newsletter, things like that. But the reality is that's not going to bring us a lot of money, right, to keep it going. And I don't want us begging every year, that we're always living off, we're almost closed 2 years ago. I'm tired of that cycle, right? We need to, quite frankly, for a lot of these newsrooms, hope is the strategy. And hope is not a strategy. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So I think, while this reckoning has happened, I don't believe this is sustaining. I would like to believe it. I don't. And then let's be real here and talk about who gets funded. People that serve communities of color, like my newsroom, often don't get funded. Even to get Report for America took a lot of effort when, they said to me, well, we're going to go to the Journal Sentinel because we think that they can support these fellows. And I said to them, look, I have nothing but love for the Journal Sentinel. It's where I spent 14 years of my life. But why are you rewarding corporate greed? It is not that Gannett doesn't have money. It's just that they don't invest their money into the newsrooms. So why are you rewarding corporate greed and not rewarding a Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service, a Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalists, the Block Club of Chicago? Why are you not rewarding newsrooms that are actually doing the work, diversifying the pipeline of journalists, having civic actors participate in a way that makes journalism sense and are innovative? But instead, you're going to the same people. Is that fair? And they came back and said, you're right. And that's how we got 2 people. But so it's a whole lot of questions. I'm a board member of an Institute for Nonprofit News that has 350 nonprofit newsrooms. And we see this question all the time is, everybody wants to start a nonprofit newsroom. Will it last? I hope so. I'm optimistic in Baltimore. Baltimore needs the Baltimore Sun. But I don't think that there's going to be winners and losers. And I always think that the losers will always be the outlets that serve people of color. That makes sense.
Yeah. Ron, this is great. I have to run, but really, really enjoyed hearing what's going on and how you're doing this. Really impressive, and we will connect for that coffee.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for the good questions, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you. It was great.
Another terrific snack. We don't get a huge crowd here, but everybody that is here is always very appreciative of the good conversation and what we learned and the connections.
Quantity, quality over quantity. So
we are. We're committed.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
Thanks a ton, Ron.
Thanks, guys.
All right, see you soon.